Mr. Ziegler, are you on?
Morning, Brad.
Good morning. I had to turn the mute off.
Whitney's on. All right, good.
Are we live, Karen?
She stepped out for just a moment to make sure that the coroners were on.
Whitney's on.
Yeah,
OPD first.
yeah.
Larry is on the extension line.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Are we live and ready to go then?
I think so.
Okay. Well, we'll go ahead and open our Wednesday AM preliminary public comments on their preliminary budget. Our first item this morning is OPD, and sounds like we have Whitney and Larry both online, so give us a breakdown, please.
Well, first of all, as far as this year goes, I want to take the opportunity to thank all of you for the support you gave us so far this year.
See, Whitney is still muted, so I don't know if she's talking. Nope. I don't hear Larry either.
You should be able to hear Larry now.
How about now, Mr. Cook? Nothing? I'm able to hear Larry.
I can hear Larry.
Who can? Who can't? Mr. Peck, did you hear me? Yes.
Commissioner Cook, you can't hear Larry? He's locked up. All right, let's go. Bob, can you hear us?
Larry or Whitney or
Turn your volume.
Pardon?
Turn your volume up.
Everybody else I can hear, but Whitney is muted, and I don't even see where Larry's on.
He's on the conference line, so you can just hear his voice.
Yeah, I'm not.
Okay,
Can anybody hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you in the commissioner's room.
Okay.
And
I got a tag on you.
yours froze up. Are you okay? Can you hear now?
I'm not. Whitney is still muted, and I don't hear Larry.
Your volume.
Oh, I can hear. Is anybody else on?
yes,
They're all talking.
we're all on.
There you go.
Something got turned off.
Can you hear us now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Yeah.
Okay, we can hear you too.
All right.
Okay, go ahead, Larry.
Again, I just wanted to start off by thanking all three of you for the support this year so far. We managed to do pretty good even through the COVID restrictions. In September, I had asked for and received approval for a increase on our felony defenders on their salary schedule. And that was done primarily because I knew that Benton was in the process of poaching once again. And you approved that. And basically I had projected for the next 3 years a salary bump of 90, 95, 97, 99. which I thought might make the contract attractive enough to keep them here. Within 3 weeks of your approval of that, Benton County poached one. And at that point in time, I went and talked to Keith and said, rather than just continue to throw money at the thing, I thought the best thing for the county to do at this point would be to adopt Benton County's contract, basically, with the same rate of pay. 5-2, there'd be no pay increase for 2022. But it just seemed to me that it was just the right thing to do at the right time for the right reasons, and it was really almost, we basically, I think, run out of in terms of patchwork approach and always trying to catch up. Now, ideally, the thing I like to see is maybe we might see a little bit more movement from the side to our side in terms of attorneys. I'm not going to say that's going to happen, but I just don't have any reservations at this point in time.
Your audio is fading in and out and garbled. If you could, and maybe you are, stay the same proximity to your microphone. It may not be you, it might just be the system, but we could try to see if it helps.
All right. How about this? Any better?
I can hear you fine.
All right, I'll lean into it. Were you able to follow the presentation at all?
Yes.
I got most of it through
In the time I've worked for you, that one of the things I've always tried to do is get the attorney's salaries basically at a fixed cost for as long as I can, because the other variables in it, of course, given the nature of the advantage, I guess, of a 2-year set cost for felony people. Now 3 of them, and there may be even a possibility of a 5th, I'm not sure. But I think I've mentioned to Keith more than once right now, I'm paying attention to the numbers as much as I can, but right now my primary focus is coverage and trying to keep the county out of the kind of a bullseye that Grays Harbor County is in right now with the Davidson case. And that's my primary concern at this point in time. Am I still on?
Any further questions? Yes.
So, Larry, is Commissioner Peck. Are you familiar with the recent state Supreme Court ruling on the ballot box issue?
On what?
On ballot box issue?
No.
Drop boxes for ballots?
No.
So I'm on the legislative steering committee with a state association of counties, and we have for lack of a better term, is a litigation committee that looks at actions that we might take with the state legislature to force the state legislature to correct their history of unfunded mandates. The most egregious of which I think is OPD. And we won that case recently, in the last 90 days. And the court has ordered the state legislature to pay the true costs of this mandate that they've placed on the county. Now, when we did this, we picked ballot boxes because we knew it was a pretty easy winner and it's pretty black and white, and also because it's a very good, clean parallel with the requirements for public defense. And I think we can see going forward, State Association of Counties now going to the court and saying, we want other unfunded mandates similarly treated now that we have a precedent. And I'm going to push the OPD be at the top of the list for things that we press for. Obviously, that doesn't take care of us immediately, but I wanted to give you a little bit of that history and what we've done and why we've done it. As for the salaries, I think that among our most important ethical obligations is ensuring that we meet our OPD requirements. And you'll find me supportive for whatever it takes within reason on these budgets, on the contracts, whether it's a 1 year, a 2 year, even a 3 year contract with reasonable escalations. But this is an obligation we need to meet, and frankly, the more it costs us, the more we strengthen our case with the legislature. Thanks.
If I might, I did read the ballot box case. I apologize. But I also noted with interest the one that was closer to our situation with OPD is the Davis versus Grace Harbor County case. And in that case, the Supreme Court said, you can't sue the state. The state's only required, as far as OPD expenses go, to provide the counties with adequate taxing authority to support the operation. But there's language in that decision, as I read it, that I think now I agree with what you're trying to do, that this may be the best time to get the Supreme Court in the county's ballpark. Maybe. So I apologize. I didn't recognize when you said ballot box. I usually go by proper names. And I can see what you're arguing in terms of trying to analogize from the ballot box to the OPD. And it'll be interesting to see what the court does with that. I really think I think they're jockeying right now to put the legislature in the same position they had them in McCleary. And I could be wrong. But we'll just have to wait to see how that plays out.
And as you might have noticed in the ballot box case, the state didn't just order the legislature to fund the infrastructure costs, but also the labor costs associated with going and collecting ballots and providing that service.
Right.
That was intended.
Any further questions for Lorraine? Like I say, I think we're all in support of your efforts, Larry. We'll see what the budget is at the end, and so we got it as a maybe on the budget list. So we'll see what we can do.
Much appreciated.
Hey Larry, I got a question for you.
With
this backup in the courts, how far behind and what are the ramifications of our court system when we can't get these people into trial?
How far behind are we right now?
Yes.
I can tell you that the last report I sat down with Mr. Sant several weeks ago, we have 400 cases set for trial. And of course, I don't know how they're going to handle that. I don't know how we're going to get through that backlog. I just can't tell you right now.
Did you say 100 cases?
400 plus.
400 cases?
Yes.
Holy mackerel.
Yes. Plus, I just got a directive from Olympia, a mandatory order that says I can't appoint more than 12 cases to any public defender in a 1 month period. So as of right now, things are starting to back up on that level too. They're backing up on my level and they're backing up on the prosecutor's level. So come January, whenever these COVID restrictions get released, then the speedy trial rule is going to kick in, and they're going to have 60 to 90 days to get a lot of these to trial. And there's not enough judges and there's not enough courtrooms. I don't physically see it getting done. I just don't. I don't know what we're going to do right now.
The other question I have is, how accessible are these attorneys? You're saying you want to get another one. How easy is it to hire, and what are the qualifications? How's the bar set on that?
the qualifications, there's just a fundamental mismatch right now. Mr. Sant, Sean and I have talked about this more than once. Sean can hire anybody he wants to, including kids right out of law school. He has no restrictions or qualifications on the lawyers that he is allowed to hire. That's strictly up to him. I, on the other hand, have to meet all the guidelines from the state bar and the Supreme Court. And I can't hire people unless they have the requisite level of experience for each category of felon. Well, it's a rule that I've said this before when I first came on. It just absolutely ignores the market situation in terms of, here's the demand for the attorneys. Do we have the ability to do that? Well, we don't. The people that are qualified don't want the job. And I can't hire the kids that would like to break into it and learn. And they just won't give in on this. I mean, I've been waiting 3 or 4 years for some kind of wiggle room. They just won't give. So that's what I have to get around in terms of hiring.
Thank you.
Further questions for Larry?
So Larry, isn't the premise on that last observation you made, isn't the premise that the state as the prosecuting entity, it's permissible for them to have a lesser experienced, skilled attorney, but because the state is the prosecuting body, the defender is the one who, of course, the accused is, as we all know, presumed innocent, and therefore is entitled to something more than somebody that just walked out of law school. Isn't that the premise for it? And
right.
It
Yes.
makes sense to me. Do you not agree with that, or?
I don't agree with it because I think it artificially closes the door to people that would like to learn the business. When I started, that's the way we learned. We were hired. We paid attention to the senior attorneys that we were working with. It was basically on-the-job training. And to be fair, were there shortcomings in that system? Yes. But there's shortcomings in any system. And now what's happened, of course, WAPA, the Association of Prosecutors, I don't think there's any way they'd ever walk in now voluntarily and say, hey, look, we only want to hire people that are qualified right out of the chute. They're not going to close off their job market. We, at the county level, had the door slammed in our face by people in Olympia. Said, hey, you're not going to hire anybody unless they meet our standards. Now,
So would you be comfortable if every one of your contracted attorneys was fresh out of law school?
no, that's
So
not
you're
what I'm
really
saying. In other words, when I
you're
started,
talking about a mixed team, right?
yes,
Okay, that kind of got lost in your explanation for me. I never heard that piece of it, and I think that would be an important part of your message is that you want that same authority, but any brand new, very junior people would be supervised by more senior folks. Just an observation.
no, it's a good observation. Under the current system, the problem you have is I don't have the money to hire somebody who doesn't meet the standards. We don't have the money to pay them to go up and sit in the courtroom and learn from the senior people on our current staff. There's just not the money available right now. Keith and I have talked about a staff system, a full-time public defense office, which is a huge jump in expense for the county. But the day may come when that's the only option the county's going to be able to exercise and get this job done. I'm not going to predict one way or the other, but I can see it shaping up. This Davis and Grays Harbor case again that they just talked about, basically the Supreme Court said, look, you can't sue us. We're not tasked with funding this thing. The legislature gave you adequate taxing authority. You guys pay for the mandates. And like I'm saying, there's language in that opinion that basically said to the Davisons, the plaintiffs, go back and reword your complaint, and we might take it up again. And I can see how this is just, it's like a lot of ping pong balls in the air right now. You can see it. So there's no way to predict what they're going to do.
Larry, I'll just close by pointing out that there's been a number of attempts by the legislature to dodge their responsibility to finance their mandates by saying that they have granted the counties taxing authority, but it overlooks the taxing capacity and the other state limits placed on county taxing authority, the 1% cap and others. And
I
that's
agree.
really going to be the crux of this going forward. They really haven't provided the taxing authority. The one exception are on council manic taxes, like the 0.1% that the legislature has already authorized for county boards of commissioners for mental health. But even that one, if we were to approve it, if we had costs beyond that, those additional costs would then become unfunded mandates. So the argument that the legislature is using and that they've used in Grays Harbor, we'll see if I'm right, but I predict it doesn't stand. We'll see.
Okay.
Yeah. Good observation, because it's our cost of living has gone up way more than the 1% that they're offering. So.
Well, Commissioner Cook, as you and I both know, on a $4,000 annual tax bill, that 1% is a little over $4. So anyone who thinks that their county board of commissioners is driving up their taxes, $4 on a $4,000 tax bill, I think it's not the board.
Yeah,
I'd like to put a little emphasis on the 4,000. I know some farmers out there that are pretty big farmers, and if they've got 100,000 or excuse me, 1,000 acres or 10,000 acres, that is a large sum of money.
granted. Anything else for Larry?
Well,
Larry will do the best we can.
You know,
Thank you.
I remember whenever Dirksen used to say a billionaire and a billionaire, and pretty soon you're talking real money.
Yeah.
And
Well, let's
I
not
like
forget that we help our farmers with about a 50-60% reduction in their values too before we tax. So that's something to keep in mind.
Okay, Larry and Whitney, thank you.
thank you.
With that, we move on to budget 680, the commissioners. Take us through that.
Certainly. Thank you, Commissioners. You'll find this under tab 24 in your binder. Just to start off with the current expense impact requested for the Commissioner's office. We have started with a request for an additional budget and policy analyst to work with me in the county administration office. The total request for that position is a salary of about $83,000 is where we expect that person to come in. Loaded with benefits, the total cost is $112,809,000. As you will recall, this has been a bit of a request in the last few budgets, but has not been a high enough priority in terms of other needs in the county. But we are fast approaching that place where it's almost unavoidable. Not to compare too much with other counties because I recognize they're organized a little bit differently, but just as a base of comparison, Benton County has about 6 or 7 people in their county administration office doing some of the same functions that we're being tasked with doing. You recall that a few years ago we hired a person primarily to make sure that our Board of Equalization issues were being covered more adequately. All of our administrative staff is very busy. I think we're keeping up with the critical issues, but there are a lot of policy and analysis kinds of things that we just haven't had the resources, the time to spend adequately performing more time working with Larry on a long-term strategy of how we address those issues going forward, because with the backlog of cases, the case limits that Olympia has imposed upon the Office of OPD, and I don't mean to single them out. They're not the highest priority necessarily all the time, but it's just one of those areas where I have not been able to spend adequate time to address that from a more global level. So I think you all understand that request. As I said, we've talked about it before in prior budget years, but I'm adding that as a request for 2021. We've looked at our operating expenditures for the office. I've made some requested adjustments based on current experience of the last couple of years. We do have an additional need for some office and operating supplies. Presuming that we have an additional person, of course, that's going to go up a little bit, but we've also exceeded our budget recently in the need for just basic office supplies. We've been able to make that up under the bottom line budget concept that we have taken from other lines that are available where we have not used up our complete budget each year. So from a bottom line perspective, we've been able to return money to the general fund or carry it over in the last couple of years. One of the areas that you're going to see, I guess it's a significant reduction. So a significant reduction in the dollar amount is for commissioner travel. We have obviously with the COVID response this year, our travel for commissioners has been reduced significantly. We don't think we need to eliminate it. That's not my intent, but I think the $3,000 reduction per commissioner would bring their annual travel expenses down to $5,000, which I think is a little more in line with what we've experienced over the past few years. Now, I recognize that Commissioner Cook and Commissioner Peck have had a number of trips over to Olympia. Commissioner Peck, coming up on the Legislative Steering Committee, will require a number of trips to Olympia. Commissioner Didier has not taken a lot of travel trips. If you think the 8,000 is the right number, we can certainly work that in, but just in line with the experience of what we've seen over the past couple of years, I think we can absorb a slight reduction there without impeding your ability to represent us in Olympia or in other locations where travel is necessary. And then we just...
So, Keith, before
Yes.
we move on,
Certainly.
yeah, I agree that we've had more budgeted for travel than any of us have probably needed. Here, I'll be on the County Road Administration Board, the Legislative Steering Committee, the Federal Issues Committee, the Litigation Committee, and the alternate to the State 911 Committee. So I think we're going to see my travel increasing, Commissioner Cook's position, District 2 declining. And it isn't that I'm not happy to share those duties with other commissioners. If they want to sign up with WASAC, they certainly can. It's just an observation that there's going to be that shift. And if the proposed budget doesn't cover it, then I'll just come back and ask for an adjustment. But I think the numbers are at least reasonable as a good starting point. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you. Then the last item on the Commissioner's current expense is just basically a reallocation of $500 between our dues and subscriptions going up and our training and certification budget going down. And that's mostly just a classification of how we bill certain expenses. I'm able to complete a lot of my training online, and that's reduced the need for training and certification costs, but our dues and subscriptions to certain organizations have gone up. So we're just basically moving $500 from one budget line to another. Dollars are actually going. So if you have any other questions about the current expense budget, all of the other lines have essentially remained fairly closely to where we were in 2020.
Keith, I have a concern. I've driven a county vehicle for, I don't know how many years now or something like that. with me driving that, everybody has gotten the same consideration on revenue. With me turning that car in and, with the current slate, of candidates, coming up next week, everybody is within 10 miles. I think Clint is probably the furthest one away at 10 miles. I don't think there's any reason to have that 22,440 in the budget any longer. The travel covers mileage over 50 miles, so you're still eligible for gas money mileage. There is no mileage between home and the office anyway. So, and I've had to, even with that pickup, I've had to pay my own mileage between home and the office and office and home. So, I think we can eliminate that whole line item personally.
I agree.
So a couple of observations. First, the mileage line that you're referring to does not and was never intended to cover your commuting to and from home. So if you've used it for that or looked at it in that way, that's improper. I don't think that's what you meant to suggest, Commissioner Cook, for a vehicle, which is certainly more costly. So keep that in mind. I'm not opposed to reducing the monthly vehicle allowance, but if we eliminate it entirely, what we do is we simply go to turning in a lot more mileage tickets or vouchers, which creates additional work for staff and everybody else, which I'm not opposed to doing, but I'm not sure that this is an all or nothing scenario. Commissioner Cook, your thoughts?
Well, as I said, I can't collect. I pay for my mileage between Connell and the office. So that's right.
Well, that was the distinction I was looking for you to make, because what you said it earlier, that wasn't clear, and I want people to know that you in fact did pay for that.
Yeah. So anyway, I guess with having the travel allowance in the commissioner's budget, I don't see a reason at all for the car allowance, because it's being covered for, like going to Moses Lake or going to Spokane or going to Olympia. And it's, if you fill it out, the travel policy when you get back, and just matter of keystroking the numbers in for mileage, it should be covered. So,
Commissioner Cook, may I just interject a brief thought? The 22,440 for car allowances really is just the monthly allocation to the three commissioners for their vehicles. The travel cost, which has been held at $8,000 per year, includes not just that's not really designed for their vehicle usage, but it's the airfare, the meals, and the lodging and the registration costs for attending conferences. Just one trip to Washington, D.C. or to an eastern state for, say, a National Association of Counties meeting, those generally cost in the nature of $2,000 or more, just for the airfare and registration and so forth. So I want to be clear that we're not talking about an option between one or the other. If we want to reduce or eliminate the car allowance figure, then it's probably going to require a corresponding increase to the travel allowances for commissioners to be able to attend some of those events and meetings.
Well, the car allowance and the travel allowance should not be tied together.
Right. And that's, I guess, what I'm trying to say is that they're only tied together in the sense that Most of your travel in the state of Washington for the actual travel, gasoline and car use is covered with your car allowance, but the registration for an event, your hotel, your meals, per diems, miscellaneous expenses associated with travel would be under the travel allowance.
I totally understand that.
Okay.
I guess when I filled out mileage in the past, it has always gone against the travel, not the car allowance. The car allowance has been a offset because I've had that pickup, and the commissioner mileage between home and the office is on your own dime. And if you log over 50 miles, like I say, we're 220 to Olympia or whatever that number is. So say it's 250 to Olympia. That's 500 miles there. It's, so that's what I'm trying to say is I don't think that mileage is deducted from the car allowance line item anyway.
I understand. I think I understand now how you're phrasing that. So that ultimately, I guess, is a discussion or decision for the commissioners to make about vehicle allowances.
Yeah, I think between now and our next review of this, it might be beneficial for folks to go back and revisit the language in the RCW. I think you'll find some additional insight there. Leave it that.
Well, basically, the car allowance is through IRS regulations.
Yeah, that's the taxation piece of the car allowance is regulated by the IRS as a fringe benefit, and it is taxed, portions of it, so much for each mile based on an assumption that a certain amount is going to be used for personal travel, plus a certain amount for mileage to and from work. I understand all that pretty thoroughly. There are other issues about travel, but I'm not going to suggest that other people should look at it my way. I would just suggest that it's more complicated than it appears on the surface, and be a good time to do some research on that.
What's your thoughts on the car allowance number then?
Well, myself, I want to go back and look at the statutes. I know other counties where commissioners have a minimal or no car allowance, and they simply apply commercial and take taxes and do those kinds of things, and ends up costing their county pretty dearly. So, not having a vehicle allowance is certainly an option, and I'm not taking a position for or against, but you have to look at whether or not it opens the door then for an individual to have, say, a county vehicle. Or if not a county vehicle, then one that's available to the office. Or if not that, going to DC. For example, no one can compel you to drive your personal auto to Washington, DC for a NACO meeting. And so you've got to look at the broad spectrum of possibilities before you can really, I think, wrap your head around what you're suggesting here. So just my view. But we're authorized a number of different options and mechanisms for travel. And the amount of local travel has definitely decreased. And I agree with you in that context. I don't know what 2021 is going to bring in that regard. Just please keep in mind that we're authorized various forms of travel, and you have to look at it in the full spectrum.
Totally agree. I'm having a hard time tying car allowances to travel. So anyway, I think that number at 22,440 is excessive. So, but I'll not be here next year, so that's somebody else's concern.
Yeah. Well, you use your vehicle for local travel and for trips to the coast, right?
Correct.
Yeah, I think that's where the implied overlap is. Thanks.
But my local travel I have paid for.
I understand, for your non-business local travel.
Yeah. Okay, no said.
Thank you. I think we're ready to move on to the miscellaneous budgets that are under the commissioner's
So
responsibility.
Keith,
Go ahead.
Before we move on, I want to speak to what I would call a deputy position in your office. Are there any departments that are still without a second senior person or deputy other than you?
Not really. OPD in some sense is probably that way. Facilities has somewhat of that structure, but Happel Center.
Certainly positions that have your scope of responsibility all have deputies.
Yes, all of the elected officials do, and all of the major department heads do.
Yeah, I know that we have been reluctant to look at a deputy for you until we had taken care of other departments. I'm just highlighting that over the last several years, we've done just that. And I do think it's time that we get you some help.
I fully agree. I think, as Keith indicated, this has come to the board for probably 4 years now. And in that last 4 years, Franklin County has probably grown by 20,000 people. And so I can totally support the request.
Well, we're very aware of the limited resources and where the priorities of the county are. So I appreciate that support, not only personally, but I do think it's in the best interest of making county government a little more responsive to the needs of the departments and the public. So thank you. If there are no other comments or questions about the current expense items, I think it can be very brief on the miscellaneous budgets. We have not requested any additional funds. I'm still looking at a couple of opportunities to perhaps pursue some reductions in our request. You'll recall that we've had some discussion about the full responsibility and requirements of the fire marshal. I'm taking a look at that. And so I think we can perhaps see, they won't be material or large dollar reductions, but we'll try to take a little harder look between now and budget setting time on the miscellaneous budgets. But I don't know if you have any specific questions, but most of those were just brought across at the 2020 level for a renewed amount for 2021 at the same funding level.
The only thing I can talk about, honestly, is that disability board, and the numbers there just is a wash. It's just a line item adjustment between medical reimbursement and Medicare premiums. So that number hasn't changed in the bottom line number hasn't changed in at least 3 years. So.
So if there are no other questions, we'll, I think, be ready to hear Mr. Beaton.
I'm here. It's Matt. You hear me?
Hey, man,
Hold on just a second, Matt.
looks like we're tab 10.
Lock the door.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm here. I mean, do you have any questions? Our budget's pretty straightforward. There's not many requests, if any, there.
This is item or tab 10 in your binder.
So Keith, I have an administrative question right up front I want to ask.
Certainly.
I'm looking at the 2021 request column, and I appreciate the fact that the amount of the reductions in budget lines and the amount in the increases appear to nearly be a wash. Are these BARS code adjustments, or is somebody making decisions for the board by approving these ahead of time?
When they are fairly insignificant amounts that do have either just a reclassification purpose, then yes, the auditor's office has put that Y or the yes answer and highlighted it in green. If it's basically a reclass between budget lines, or if in fact
okay, if it's a reclass, I've got no issue with it whatsoever. If it's not a reclass, my issue is not the amount of money or anything else. It's the fact that I don't think we've done this for other departments, and I want to be sure we're same across the board, especially when it's this office that prepares this preliminary budget. So I'm going to just take it that these are merely BARS reclassifications, and the marking them yes is entirely appropriate.
yeah, they're not completely. If the amount in total for the operating expenses results in a net reduction, then and we have been consistent with other departments to go ahead and preliminarily authorize that. For example, in the auditor's office.
Yeah, I'm not looking at the reductions, Keith.
Yeah, no, there are two increases. One, looks like for travel, an additional $500, and one for registrations of additional $125, and their dues and subscriptions by an increase of $425. So the board.
Yeah, I get all that. And what I'm talking about is the practice that we treat everybody the same. And if these are BARS reclasses, I got no problem with it. It's perfectly appropriate. But I don't want other departments thinking that, some folks are getting a pass.
Yeah, I
And
think,
whether it's $1 or 10,000, it's the process I'm asking about.
understood. And yes, we're consistent across all the agencies for handling those the same way.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah, I'd like to add, I mean, that's the case, is that's in each line, Commissioner, that those, I don't know if you maybe haven't noticed it until it came to the auditor's office, but in fact, we helped Keith prepare this on behalf of the commissioners, and that's a consistency, as far as I can tell, across each budget. But thank you for pointing it out.
I agree. When it's merely a BARS change, that is consistent. And I think the consistent practice elsewhere has been that if it's a decrease, it's green. If it's an increase, unless it is simply a BARS swap, then it goes to yellow. So it sounds like we're all on the same page.
Any other questions on the auditor budget? What do we got next? We got auto licensing and what other?
Commissioners, I do have one question on the elections side of things, and it's related to the possibility of changes to our elections. I realize it's very early in the process and we don't know all of the outcome of the letter that we received from the ACLU, but my question perhaps maybe is for Mr. Beaton is what kind of impact would it be if we had to have a special election in 2021?
So,
Go ahead.
I mean, there's a couple of things in statute that are coming next year that are going to impact, the cost of elections. The two of them are we're going to have to produce and mail a voter's pamphlet for every election involved. In the cases of if we have to add a special election, we generally, we take our past budgets and look at what has been the average. I think we have one special election allocated for, but and that if we happen to have more, then we'll just come to the board. Typically, though, when you have those, they are paid for by the participant. I mean, whether it's a school board or whatever it is. So it's generally just a pass through.
Questions? Did that answer your question, King?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Anything further, commissioners? Anything further, Matt, you want to address?
No, thank you. Thank you for all the hard work to everybody that's put this, given the circumstances. It's interesting, so I appreciate it.
All right, well, thank you then. With that, our next item on our agenda is a 10-minute break. Excuse me. Then we'll come back with the coroner and county agent.
Do we have to stay on that schedule or could I have them come early? Commissioners, if you would allow a 10-minute break, we'll see if we can get the coroner and the county agent available early.
All right, yeah, it is just 10 o'clock. Great, thank you.
We're quite a ways
Yep,
ahead of
thanks,
schedule,
Pete.
but I don't want to have you just sit and wait. So I'll contact them and see if they can come back at, 10 after?
Okay?
All right. Thank you.
Well, yeah, 10 after.
here and I can come back at 10 after.
Okay, thank you, Curtis.
say something wrong.
Okay, we're hot.
All right. We're back from our break, and we do have Mr. McGarry, our coroner, online next. So, commissioners ready? Okay. Curtis, what have you got for us today? It looks like pretty much straightforward.
Yes, good morning, gentlemen, commissioners. So just want to go over some things here with you. This has kind of been a crazy year with the COVID. At this point, we're 92 cases ahead of where we were last year at this time. Some of those can be contributed to COVID, some of them can't. Kind of go over our revenue here a little bit. The state reimburses us 40% for all adult autopsies and 100% for infant autopsies. So from July of last year to July of this year, we've received $12,135 reimbursed from the state. We've also received approximately $533 and some other revenue that we've been able to gain by transporting to and from procurement locations with the vehicle that we have. We've been able to bill for that and get reimbursed for that. Our expenses, we are at 54% for the year. The only real...
That's through the end of September, Curtis?
What's that?
Is that through the end of September or
yes,
mid-year?
End of September.
Okay.
Yes. The only other expense, a big expense I have is my accreditation that we've been working on this year. So on the 1st through the 3rd, we will have
Excuse me, Curtis. I'm not really able to hear you very well.
Examiners and coroners
Curtis,
on site.
sorry to interrupt you, but can you move closer to your microphone and speak loudly?
Okay.
Thank you.
Get right up there on it. Does that help any?
Yes.
Okay. I know there's a lot of feedback. So for our, we do have the accreditation that we're excited about. So we've been working at that. That expense will be about $3,800 is what we're looking at for that. That's paying for their lodging and travel, per diems and things. As far as in our budget, there has been a couple of things there from September when I submitted it. We are downsizing our printer. We don't need that big of a printer. It was $1,030 annually, and it looks like we're going to bring that down to just under $540 annually. With the onset of COVID, we've had some interruptions. Our forensic pathologist that performed our autopsies temporarily suspended his services due to health concerns for himself and his family. And then in July, he informed us that he was retiring effective immediately. In March, we entered into an agreement with Snohomish County Medical Examiner's Office, which is in Everett, to perform our autopsies. So now we're transporting to Snohomish County Medical Examiner's Office. There was a silver lining to that. Our local autopsy expenses were $1,900 per autopsy. Snohomish County ME's office charges us $1,029, resulting in a $870 autopsy savings. if we didn't have the current truck that we have, we'd be incurring about a $600 to $800 per trip expense. When we do transport, this leaves us without a functional vehicle for the day. And we have to ask the local funeral homes to provide that transportation. The two vehicles that we have, the other two are not designed to be used for transport. They are older, have various things that need to be repaired on them. And so I am asking for capital outlay request is the purchase of a second truck, similar to the truck setup that we have now. In that total would be $39,300. $34,000 is for the purchase of the truck, $3,000 for the purchase of the canopy, and $2,300 for a mortuary cost for the transport of the deceased on. On the budget proposal, I failed to calculate the cost of putting the truck in the E&R fund. With the truck in the E&R fund, line item number 4807, repair and maintenance of vehicles, has an annual budget of $3,000. That would be moved to help fund that E&R funding. And then also line item 4914 is my autopsy fund. We could decrease that by $3,000, moving those $3,000 to the E&R fund also. And then the savings from the printer would be $490, for a total of $6,490. That would be, with putting the truck in the E&R, that would increase my annual budget by $1,040. What that $1,040 doesn't also consider is the $800 or more in gas that I would be paying out if it wasn't in the E&R. Curtis, so I'm asking for that truck because we do need some vehicles that will work. These other two are beyond repairs. Cost-wise, it's just not effective to repair them. Those are the things that the truck is what I'm asking for. Other than that, everything else is staying the same.
Curtis, can you hear me?
Curtis, can you hear Commissioner Cook?
I can now. I didn't. So if you can repeat that, Bob.
Okay, are all these numbers you have quoted here in the last few moments reflected with the auditor's office? Because they aren't reflected on our worksheet we're working from.
Bob, this is Tom. No, they're not.
No, they are not. The $39,300 should be.
That's reflected in our sheet here, but all the rest of your, the printers and the autopsy costs and so on and so forth are not reflected on the sheets that we're working from. So are they been advanced to the auditor's office or?
I have those ready to go to the auditor's office. The printer savings we just got, and then as I was looking at this, I realized that I did not put those other two on there. So.
Okay, I was just curious because there's nothing showing here with the adjustments that you have discussed. So you would get those to the auditor's office so they can adjust your preliminary budget.
Yes, I'll have those to them this afternoon. Not earlier.
Curtis, this is Commissioner Didier. You mentioned the 4804 line. I don't have that on my sheet. What was that again?
It should be 4801.
Oh, 4801. Okay, I got it. Got it. All righty. righty, thank you.
Any other questions for Curtis?
Curtis, I'm assuming that you've looked at other closer options for autopsy than Everett, Washington, like
Yes, we have. The closer would be Spokane. They do not want to participate. There are agencies up there, counties up there in that area that are even transporting to Snohomish County because they do not want to take on extra work. We have looked at bringing other pathologists in, and more than likely that would result back to that $1,900 fee.
Well, the savings going to Snohomish, is that offset your travel then? Wasn't able to hear that very well.
Yes, that's an $827 savings, which more than offsets that travel expense.
Good, thank you.
Curtis, in that travel expense, I'm assuming you're not counting any labor or time costs?
No, that's always either myself or my chief deputy coroner who are salaried, so there's no extra pay on that.
Do you have to maintain a staffing level so that when someone is on these trips, you have coverage? And does that result in any overtime?
It does not. Either Ruben or myself will cover, and so it has never cost overtime.
Okay. Have you had conversations with Spokane County about a joint proposal with the Spokane County, Franklin County, and who knows, maybe Adams or some other county to combine to create enough work to entice a new provider in Spokane? I realize that's a stretch. I'm just curious if you've gone that far.
We have checked with Spokane. They do not want to take on the extra work. So as it is right now, Walla Walla, Benton County, Franklin County, Yakima County, all transport to Snohomish County.
And are these autopsies normally conducted by pathologists or medical examiners? Who's normally doing these?
So to do them, you have to be a board certified forensic pathologist.
Okay.
All of the pathologists over in Snohomish County are board certified forensic pathologists.
One other question, Curtis, you mentioned your boards or your certification. I couldn't hear very well. How close are you to getting that?
That will be completed December 1st is when they come.
Okay, thank you.
You know, my predecessor had mentioned that it was certified, and when I got in office, I found out that that had expired 2 years earlier.
And Curtis, you mentioned $3,800 for accreditation costs to cover the team's travel and other expenses, which I'm assuming is standard practice. Do you have those funds in your budget this year?
Yes, those funds are in our budget through our travel expense. Kind of prepared for that, so we didn't do as much traveling because I wanted to take that out of this year's expense.
So the 3,800 that you mentioned earlier for accreditation costs is not part of your 2021 budget?
Correct, it is not. That'll come out of my 2020 budget.
Okay, when you were talking about it, I misunderstood that was part of your 2020 request. Thank you.
All right, Curtis, anything further, Curtis or commissioners? Okay.
Oh, Curtis, just one other quick question.
I'm aware of budget cuts and how the budget is going.
Yeah, Curtis, I just want to ask, the last vehicle you bought, was that on the state contract, and is that what you're intending to do again?
Yes, it was, and yes, we are. I looked at used vehicles, but used vehicles cost as much as a new one with the state bidding process.
Used vehicles are expensive right now for a lot of reasons.
Yes, they are.
And you got a terrible chance right now of getting one that came out of a flood or a hurricane or something. So, Curtis, thank you for your time. Unless there's other questions, we appreciate it. Hearing none, thanks, Curtis.
All right, thank you.
That'll get us to Mr. Waters at WSU.
Good morning.
Morning, Tim.
Sorry, my camera's at a funny angle, so if it seems like I'm not looking at you, I am looking at the screen. So it feels funny not looking people in the eye when you're asking them for money, but
All right, what have you got for us today?
so what do you want to start? We want to start with attachment A. I think those are our only changes. Maybe I could just offer some general comments before we dive into that. So, it's been a challenging year for everybody, I know. One thing out of our office financially is our faculty have been very productive this season and for the next few seasons, actually, because a lot of the grants we work on are multi-year, but we've been very successful in procuring grants in the office. So that's been a very fortunate thing given the constraints I'm sure we have with the county budget going into this next year. So with that in mind, so we've had a very successful grant year for a bunch of us in the office. And then with all the COVID stuff, our travel, the way we do business at WSU has changed significantly. So for this year's budget, we'll actually be returning some funds from several different line items because we just didn't expend the funds because we operated a little bit differently over the last several months. So I just wanted to start with that. And then going into 2021, like I said, we've all the faculty have had a very successful grant year and going into the coming year. So we have reduced, we don't have any increased line items on the budget. We have a lot of decreased line items. So we did that because we've had successful grant funding and we've changed the way we've done business a little bit. I anticipate the first quarter of 2021 will be a little bit different for us as well. And I wanted to be sensitive to the constraints that the county was going to be under. So I can go through those decreases if you want. But since they're decreases, you guys usually don't ask for a lot of details in those. And like I said, we decreased in areas where we've reduced, the way or changed the way we do business a little bit. And then, like I said, we've had very good grant years. And some of these expenses we can put onto grants that we might charge the county for some of the office and operating supplies and postage and that kind of thing. But we can cover that out of some of the grants because it's just the way that the system works favorably for us when the grant funding is good.
Yeah, looking at the preliminary budget, it looks like the only increases are just the salaries and wages, attrition raises. So
That's right, and that's for county staff. WSU, the Washington State Association of Counties, didn't do any increases on faculty salaries. So it is just staff. The staff salaries in the office were the only increases in any of the lines on the budget. So.
Yeah. All right. Budget looks good, Tim.
Okay.
Glad,
we're working on putting together a kind of a throw sheet for you guys on kind of what we've been doing. But like I said, all the programs have been very, very successful, and the grants are all multi-year grants. So I hope that we can kind of keep with the trend on this budget going into the next year, hopefully too. So faculty have been working hard. The staff have been working hard. Like I said, it's been a challenging year, but everybody's been working hard and doing the best they can.
all right. Questions, gentlemen?
Ditto to what Commissioner Cook said about trimming your budget. You know, with those grant funds, you wouldn't necessarily have to have done this. You could have come in with a flat budget. I appreciate the fact that you demonstrated the integrity to cut where you could, even though you could have just taken the grant. So kudos to you for your integrity and your honesty. And secondly, there's lots of cosmic crisp apples in the stores these days, so you've lost some of your leverage. Just wanted to
Hey, we grow pretty good potatoes and onions over here too, but we tried to give some of them away, and everybody tells me they're on diets and they don't want to eat potatoes. I don't like to hear that, so don't tell me if you're not eating potatoes and stuff like that. Don't tell me.
No, onions and potatoes, absolutely, anytime.
Commissioners, I have a question. I hate to put Dr. Waters on the spot. It's not specific to his budget, but more the county budget in general looking forward. Just because of the time of year, I'm wondering, Tim, if it would be helpful to just give us a very brief update on onion and potato prices and ag commodities in general, the price of farmland, and kind of rely on your expertise a little bit of what we can expect in agriculture over the next year, if you wouldn't mind just off the top of your head responding. I probably should have prepped you for that question, but if you have 30 seconds, since we're running a little bit ahead of schedule, if you wouldn't mind just kind of responding to that. Thank you.
No, everybody always does this to me, Keith, so don't feel bad. This is my life is on the spot. So, and maybe Commissioner Didier can probably kick in on this commentary too, but it's been a pretty rough year for a lot of and I'll talk mostly about vegetable growers because that's what I know. Early last year when the COVID crisis hit, a lot of growers had potato ground rented. They had it fumigated, which in terms of the cost of production, fumigation is very, very expensive. And you only do that for a few crops because of the expense and then the expected return on the crop. So some growers had contracts that they expected to get not really pulled out from under them, but sort of pulled out from under them. And so the number of acres that got planted was slightly reduced. And then the restaurants and stuff weren't open around the country and around the world. And so use was way down. So we came into a situation in July where we usually have early potatoes that are harvested the first week of July. And none of those potatoes got dug they were about 2 to 3 weeks behind. And the reason for that is because the storage crop from the previous season was still in good shape and hadn't been utilized by the processors like it normally would have been. So it pushed a lot of our harvest back, which put a lot of strain and stress on growers because when they have them in the ground longer, it costs more money, of course, to grow that. You do get better yields typically. But it's been a pretty tough year. I know people were still harvesting potatoes when we started this week, which is not a great thing. It doesn't, I think that our acres, in Washington, when people aren't eating at restaurants, Washington growers get hurt worse than any other group of growers in the nation because we grow so many processed vegetables in this area. So if people aren't eating at restaurants, it really hurts our growers. If schools aren't in session, all that stuff really has a big impact on us. So I think that, I would anticipate that when the new contracts come out for growers that they're not going to be any better than this year. They might be a little bit worse. I don't see a good I don't think it's going to be a great year coming unless things open up quicker than I think they're going to open up. And I hate to be a pessimist, but, and then that, it's the impact, I'm talking about potatoes and then onions in particular, but the impact goes throughout. The only silver lining is fresh, like the fresh industries have done better. So like fresh potatoes did far better than processed potatoes. And some of the fresh onion stuff, but all the processed stuff was quite a bit worse than it typically is. One silver lining, we are continuing to see more diversity of vegetable crops up in the basin. And I think that will help growers a little bit because, some of these crops that are coming up are higher value crops, and it'll help with rotations where we can lengthen out rotations of some of these crops, and then the diversity, so growers have a few more options. But the nice thing is going into this year, growers won't be fumigating more acres. I mean, they'll adjust. Growers are quick to adjust. The growers that are in business are good at what they do, and they're quick to adjust. So I don't think we'll have as rough of a situation for growers because they've anticipated the changes now, but it's not going to be great. So does that help?
If I might add, Tim, there is also the fact that there was potatoes planted this spring that they disced under, so they had more investment in that ground than just fumigation. Also the fact that there is another silver lining, and that's the price of corn. It's on the rise, which if you're a corn grower, you're going to do better. But with that, it might help out the hay farmers because the hay is pretty static and actually is falling off the table. A lot of stacks stacked up out there. The other thing that we got to be aware of is with this late potato harvest, in this kind of weather, there is no way to establish a cover crop. So if we get some winds this winter, you need to be careful on travel because there's going to be a lot of dirt flying and visibility will be down to zero in some areas.
That's a good point. We had the same problem on my farm, my test plots over there. We finished digging potatoes on Monday of last week, and the grower I rent from came by and shut the water off because it was going to get cold. So I've got to beg and plead with them to let me turn the water back on when it warms up a little bit more to get some moisture on that ground to get those cover crops up. But that's a really good point. When those come out later, it makes it really hard to establish a cover crop, especially when we go down to these cooler temperatures. I'm glad the price of corn is good. We need some silver linings in the whole thing. And like I said, that diversity and some of those other commodity prices come up will help for sure. But, these higher value crops in the rotation really anchor a lot of the rotations and hurt pretty bad when they go down.
I had a question earlier this year when we had that smoke conversion for a week or 10 days or whatever it actually was. I think Clint and I have talked a little bit about that. I don't know if anybody's had any test plots made of that smoke hurt the alfalfa or the protein or anything, or?
Yeah, one thing it hurt Commissioner Cook was we had some onions that we're trying to finish, and when you get that high humidity and no sun, the tops don't dry out. So I went and looked at a field from Franklin County, 4 or 5 weeks ago, and the grower called me at 6 o'clock. And when they call me at 6 o'clock, I know it's a bad thing. So I drove over to the storage, and I could smell the rot before I got into my pickup. And the onions were basically half of them going into the shed were already rotten. And it was because the poor drying conditions, because the high humidity and no sunlight for that 10, 14 days, whatever ridiculous amount of time it was. So that was a direct impact on a field where if they don't have those sold already, they're probably leaking out of the bottom of the storage. So that's a big loss there. And I think the loss of photosynthesis during those periods and then that high humidity, one of the reasons we do so great in this area is we get these hot, dry days, and you can dry crops out pretty nice. But when you don't get those sunny conditions, it makes a big difference. And you can feel it when you got out of your vehicle in the morning or went to get into your vehicle, all the dew that was on everything. And that's not what we're normally accustomed to that part of the year. So yeah, that's a good point. And I hadn't thought about that in a while, but that was kind of rough on a lot of things.
Yeah.
And the crews too. I mean, we got crews that are out, dealing with wearing masks and everything all the time. And then you add on the fact that there's, smoke inhalation, for some of those in the population that have underlying conditions. That was tough to get out and work in the, when we have people riding harvesters and all those kinds of things that time of year.
The other thing on that smoke was the fact the alfalfa. We ended up going from trying to catch a dew just to try to get rid of a dew, as he just mentioned, the fact that we could not get that hay dried down. Now, one question I'd like to ask you is garlic seems to be making a big indent in the area here. I saw a couple fields last year, but I've seen a whole lot more planted this year. It seems like that's a new crop that could come in and aid in some diversity.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's an example of one of those crops that comes out of California. And we've grown it a little bit for a bunch of years, but the acres have gone up quite a bit. And really what we grow here is we increase seed for California garlic. So they send it up here because we've got clean ground that doesn't have specific diseases on it. So these growers planted out, you saw it planted out probably in late August, early September. Yeah. And it looks really nice right now. One of the nice green things out right now. And they'll grow that and they'll harvest it in the late summer and send it down to California. And in California, they'll plant it for all the DI garlic. So yeah, it's a good crop, good value to it. And that's an example of one of those that we see more acreage of. The other one that's, we get, like I said, a lot of other types of vegetables. I had a guy bring me celery into the office the other day, just beautiful celery plants. And that's one I have never grown around here, but they were absolutely just beautiful looking plants and, leafy, some of the leafy greens and stuff like that. So it's going to be interesting. I think it's going to be good for our growers to get some of these higher value crops in.
Tim, one question I got for you is on the yield of the corn is down. I can't really attest that to the smoke. I think it'd be more to the when it pollinates, but what do you attribute the yield of the corn? I know that our field, we're barely around 6 tons to the acre when previous years were 7.5, but why is the yield down on the cornfields? And it's just not me. Everybody's seeing the same thing and talking to neighbors.
Yeah, and I looked at a growing degree day chart. One of the consultants sent me this morning, and we're pretty much on average for growing degree days. But I think that maybe those late summer temperatures going down like that could be. Corn's a C4, so it loves heat. So when you take away that heat, it's really going to have a big impact. And we grew some field corn out at our station.
We lost you,
Tim. We lost your audio.
Jim?
He's still
going after it, but we're not hearing him.
One-sided conversation here. Yeah. Tim, you're mute.
Uh-oh. Did I get muted?
There you go.
Yeah, we can hear what you said.
Oh.
Your mouth
I didn't say you were a bad farmer. No, I think those, anytime you turn down the temperature on corn, it doesn't do well. That was the synopsis of it.
Yeah. Any further questions for Tim? Well, looks like everybody is comfortable. Tim, thanks for your time. Thanks for your input.
Yep, no problem. Call me anytime. Appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. With that wraps up our Wednesday AM portion. We're due back here at 1 p.m. for an afternoon session. So we will go into, I guess you'd call it a recess until 1 p.m. So enjoy your lunch. Thank you.
Finally,